There are memories that never fade. They do not soften with time. They remain warm, restless, alive beneath the skin, like a breath held too long. This is one of those memories, and it always begins the same way, with heat, silence, and a sentence that was never meant to be said out loud. No one can handle the size of your world. I did not mean it the way it later sounded. I meant the weight of him, the gravity, the distance between who he was and who I was allowed to be. My name is Elena Moore, and I was 22 when my life tilted without warning. I remember the air that morning, thick, humid, clinging to my skin as if it already knew what was coming. I remember how my dress stuck slightly to my thighs as I stood outside the iron gates of Harrington Estate on the outskirts of Montecito, California. A place too large, too quiet, too controlled to belong to someone like me. The gates were tall, black, cold to the touch. I pressed my palms together, not in prayer, but to stop them from shaking. I had never been inside a mansion before, not even close. My world had been small, modest, practical. Dirt roads, shared meals, thin walls, long silences filled with effort rather than luxury. I was not naive, I was simply untouched by excess. And untouched in other ways too. I had never given my body to anyone. Not out of fear, not out of ignorance, but out of a quiet, private choice I never felt the need to justify. In my neighborhood, that made me strange. To some, laughable. To others, something fragile they spoke about in lowered voices. But I never felt small because of it. That morning, though, standing before Harrington Estate, I felt small in a way that had nothing to do with my body. The house loomed beyond the gates, pale stone glowing softly in the early sun. The gardens were manicured with surgical precision, every hedge trimmed, every path clean. It wasn't beauty meant to invite, it was beauty meant to warn. This place had rules, and they were invisible. When the gates finally opened, they did so slowly, silently, as if the house itself were deciding whether to allow me in. I stepped forward. Inside, the world grew quieter, not peaceful, controlled, the kind of silence that listens back. The marble floors reflected light like water. My shoes made almost no sound, yet I felt as though every step announced me. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and something colder, discipline maybe. The other staff noticed me immediately. Some glanced with polite disinterest, others with open assessment, a few with judgment sharp enough to feel on my skin. I kept my gaze lowered, not from submission, but from instinct. I had learned early how to exist without drawing attention. Still, I could feel it, something shifting, not around me, inside me. His name moved through the house before he did. Owner, billionaire, 34. Power made human. His name carried weight. Doors opened at the sound of it. Voices softened. People adjusted their posture when it was spoken. They said no one could endure him for long, that his presence filled rooms until there was no air left for anyone else, that his world was too large, too demanding, too unforgiving. I listened. I absorbed none of it. To me, he was simply the man who owned the house, the man I would work for, nothing more. Hours passed before I saw him. I was learning the unspoken rules. Don't ask questions, don't linger, don't look too long. When the atmosphere changed, no announcement, no raised voice, just a shift. People straightened. Conversations stopped. The house seemed to inhale. He entered the main hall with calm certainty. Tall, impeccably dressed. His presence was not loud, but it was absolute. He did not need attention. It followed him anyway. I felt him before I saw him. My instinct was to lower my gaze like everyone else, but something in me resisted. Not rebellion, not courage, just truth. I looked up. Our eyes met. It lasted no more than a second, but the world paused. There was no immediate attraction, no spark, no drama. There was confusion. His expression didn't change, yet something tightened behind his eyes. He wasn't used to being looked at that way. Not with calculation, not with fear, not with admiration, just presence. He moved on, continued walking. The moment passed, but it did not disappear. That night, in the small service room assigned to me, simple bed, narrow window, clean sheets, I sat on the edge of the mattress and tried to slow my breathing. My body felt warm, alert. Not aroused, not excited, awake, as if something inside me had been touched without contact. Across the estate, in a room far larger than mine, Sebastian stood alone, surrounded by glass and steel and numbers that bent to his will. And for reasons he could not name, the calm eyes of a new employee refused to leave his mind. Neither of us knew it yet, but that was the first moment, the beginning. I did not fall asleep easily that first night. The bed was narrow, the sheets too clean, the room too quiet. My body lay still, but my thoughts refused to obey. Every time I closed my eyes, the same image returned, not his face exactly, but the way the air had changed when he entered the room. The way my chest had tightened, as if my lungs had briefly forgotten how to work. I told myself it was nothing. New place, new routine, nerves. Yet my skin felt unusually aware of itself, as though it were listening for something it had never been asked to notice before. I turned onto my side, then my back. The mattress creaked softly. Somewhere far away, the estate settled into its nightly stillness. I breathed slowly, deliberately, until my thoughts loosened their grip. The next morning arrived with pale light slipping through the narrow window. I dressed carefully, smoothing my simple uniform, tying my hair back with steady hands. I looked at myself in the small mirror and saw the same woman I had always been, quiet, composed, ordinary. But something in my eyes had shifted. Work began early. The house moved like a machine, precise, efficient, emotionally neutral. I learned quickly where things went, how they were done, when to speak and when silence was expected. My movements grew smoother, my steps lighter, as if I were learning a dance whose rhythm was never explained. And yet, beneath that order, there was tension. Sebastian Harrington did not seek me out. He did not call my name. He did not speak to me directly. In fact, he barely seemed aware of me at all. And still, I felt him. Sometimes it was the sound of his footsteps echoing down a corridor. Sometimes it was the way conversations softened when he passed nearby. Other times, it was nothing more than a pressure in the air, a sense of being observed without knowing how or from where. I never caught him staring, but I caught the aftermath of his attention. A moment too long of silence after I passed. A shift of weight, a breath drawn and held, small things, almost nothing. Almost. From my side, I told myself to remain focused. This was a job, a rare opportunity. I had worked too hard, endured too much, to let imagination interfere with reality. Yet imagination has its own timing. One afternoon, I was organizing the library, a vast room lined with dark wood and shelves that rose higher than I could reach. The windows were open just enough to let in a breeze, carrying the scent of salt and sun-warmed leaves. My skin felt warm beneath the fabric of my uniform. The work was quiet, repetitive, grounding. I reached for a book on a lower shelf and felt it then. That shift. I did not turn immediately. I did not need to. Sebastian was there. Not close, not far. Standing near the window, his jacket draped over one arm, his presence filling the space without effort. He hadn't announced himself. He never did. I straightened slowly, my back suddenly aware of its own line, my shoulders of their tension. I faced him with calm respect, my expression neutral. "Yes, sir," I asked, my voice steady. For a brief moment, he did not answer. His eyes moved over me, not with hunger, not with judgment, but with a focus that felt almost dangerous in its restraint, as if he were trying to understand something that refused to be reduced to numbers or control. "I need that shelf cleared," he said finally, gesturing vaguely. His voice was low, even, controlled. "Of course," I replied. I turned back to my task, my pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I felt him remain there, felt the space between us stretch and tighten at the same time. I reached upward, standing on the tips of my toes, my fingers brushing the edge of a book, just out of reach. Before I could think, he moved. Not abruptly, not dramatically. He stepped closer and reached past me, his arm extending above my shoulder to retrieve the book with ease. His presence enveloped me, not touching, not quite, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the faint scent of clean fabric and something deeper, something human. If you're still here, it's because this story touched something inside you. Before we go any further, Tom, pause for a second. Would you have stayed? Or would you have walked away when love started to feel dangerous? Tell me in the comments. I'm reading every word. For a single breath, we were suspended there. My back inches from his chest, my head tilted slightly upward, his arm near my face. I did not turn, he did not step away. The silence stretched, thick and alive. Then he placed the book in my hands. "Here," he said quietly. Our fingers brushed. It was nothing. It was everything. A spark, brief and contained, shot through me. Not desire exactly, but awareness sharpened to a painful edge. I stepped back immediately, lowering my gaze. "Thank you, sir," I said. He nodded once and left without another word. I stood there long after he was gone, my heart beating hard enough to make me dizzy. My body felt warmer than before, my skin sensitized, as if every nerve had leaned forward all at once. That night I lay awake again, but this time I did not fight the thoughts. I remembered the closeness, the heat, the careful distance he had kept even as something unspoken had pulled us together. I remembered the way his silence had felt heavier than words. Across the estate, Sebastian sat alone in his bedroom, the city lights distant and blurred through glass. He loosened his tie and rested his hands on the edge of the bed, his mind replaying the moment in the library with unwanted clarity. He was not used to this. He was used to wanting things and taking them, to attraction that announced itself clearly, predictably. What unsettled him was not desire, but restraint. Elena Moore did not offer herself with glances or gestures. She did not try to be seen. She existed as she was, unguarded and whole, and that quiet integrity pressed against something in him he had long kept sealed. Days passed and the tension grew, not louder but denser. Our interactions remained minimal, professional, restrained, yet the space between us felt increasingly charged. Every shared room seemed smaller. Every accidental proximity lingered longer than it should. Sometimes I would catch him watching me from across a room, his expression unreadable. When our eyes met, he did not look away immediately. Neither did I. There was no smile, no invitation, just recognition. I began to notice my own body in new ways, the way my breath changed when he was near, the way my skin warmed under his attention. At night, my bed felt different, not lonely, but restless. The sheets tangled beneath my legs as I shifted, my thoughts circling something I refused to name. I was not ashamed, but I was afraid, because desire was no longer an abstract idea. It was present, contained, waiting. And I knew deep in my chest that once it moved, nothing would stop it gently. The tension did not announce itself. It settled in quietly, like humidity before a storm, clinging to everything without permission. It lived in pauses, in half-seconds of silence that stretched too long, in breaths drawn and not released right away. Nothing about it was obvious. That was what made it dangerous. I noticed it first in the way the house reacted to him. Sebastian Harrington had always commanded space, but now that space seemed unsettled, as if it no longer knew how to behave around him. People still lowered their voices. They still stepped aside, but something beneath the routine had shifted. A rigidity that once felt absolute had developed small, almost invisible cracks. And I knew, without knowing how, that I was part of that change. I tried to ignore it. I focused on my tasks, on precision, on silence. I reminded myself daily that this was not my world, that I was here to work, not to feel. Desire, I told myself, was a luxury for people who could afford mistakes. Yet desire has little respect for logic. It grew in the smallest moments. When I passed him in the hallway and felt his attention linger on my back, not touching, not calling me back, but present all the same. When he asked for something simple, and our eyes met a fraction longer than necessary. When I heard his voice from another room, and felt my body respond before my mind could intervene. I began to sense his mood without seeing him. Some days the house felt heavier, his steps slower, his silence more intense. Other days there was a restlessness in the air, a sharpness that made even the most routine actions feel charged. He never raised his voice, he never lost control, but I could feel the effort it took to maintain it. One evening I was asked to deliver documents to his study. It was a simple task, one I had done before. Still, my stomach tightened the moment I stepped onto the quiet corridor leading to that room. The door was slightly open. I paused, adjusting the folder in my hands, smoothing my uniform as if fabric could calm my nerves. Then I knocked softly. "Come in," his voice said. The study was dimmer than the rest of the house, lit by warm lamps rather than overhead lights. Shadows softened the sharp lines of the room. Sebastian stood near his desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, his posture tense in a way I had never seen before. He looked human, tired, focused, unarmored. I stepped inside, the door closing quietly behind me. "These are the files you requested," I said, placing them on the desk with careful precision. "Thank you," he replied. I turned to leave. "Elena." He said my name for the first time. It stopped me cold. I faced him again, my heart suddenly loud in my chest. "Yes, sir." He hesitated. That hesitation spoke louder than anything else. "I've noticed." He paused, then exhaled softly. "You've adjusted well." It was not a compliment dressed as praise, it was an observation, almost personal. "I try to do my work properly," I answered. "I know," he said. Our eyes held. The silence thickened, heavy with everything unsaid. I became acutely aware of the space between us, of the warmth of the room, of the faint sheen of sweat at the base of my neck from the long day. His gaze flicked briefly, not to my body, not in appraisal, but to my face, as if searching for something there. "You may go," he said quietly. I left without another word, my legs unsteady only after the door closed behind me. That night I did not sleep at all. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts circling the sound of my name in his voice. It had not been commanding. It had not been casual. It had been careful. Across the estate, Sebastian remained awake as well, standing at the window of his bedroom, the darkened grounds stretching endlessly below. His mind replayed the moment in his study, the restraint it had taken not to say more. He had wanted to ask questions he had no right to ask. Where she came from, what she wanted, why her presence unsettled him more than any challenge he had faced in years. He had not asked. Instead, he felt the pressure build. Days passed and the tension escalated. Not through touch, not through confession, through proximity. We began to find ourselves in the same spaces more often than coincidence could explain. The kitchen, the corridors, the garden paths in the early morning when the air was still cool and the world felt briefly unclaimed. We never spoke more than necessary, and yet every interaction carried weight. Once in the garden, I bent to tend to a row of flowers, unaware that he had stepped outside. I felt his presence before I heard him, my spine tightening, my breath catching. "You don't need to do that," he said. I straightened slowly, brushing soil from my hands. "It's part of my assignment." He watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You do more than required," he said. "I do what feels right," I replied before I could stop myself. The words hung between us, honest and unguarded. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "That may be dangerous," he said finally. "For whom?" I asked softly. For a second, something like surprise crossed his face. "For both of us," he answered. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. The tension did not only belong to us. Others noticed it too. Whispers followed me down hallways. Looks lingered longer than before. There was a subtle shift in how people treated me, not openly hostile, but watchful, curious, cautious. And then there was Vivienne Caldwell. She entered Sebastian's life the way she always had, with certainty. Tall, elegant, impeccably dressed, Vivienne carried herself as if the world were already arranged in her favor. Her presence was sharp, controlled, undeniable. She belonged to his world in a way I never could. From the moment she noticed me, I felt it. The assessment, the dismissal, the threat. She watched me as one might watch a flaw in an otherwise perfect design. I became aware of her through small comments, subtle gestures, questions asked too sweetly to be innocent. She wanted to place me, categorize me, reduce me. I did not give her the satisfaction. I remained polite, distant, unchanged. That seemed to unsettle her more than defiance ever could. Sebastian began to feel the strain as well. Vivienne's presence, once familiar and predictable, now felt abrasive. Her remarks, once overlooked, started to sound cruel. Her assumptions, once accepted, began to feel wrong. He did not defend me openly. Not yet. But he noticed, and noticing changed everything. The emotional tension reached a breaking point one evening when the house felt unusually still. Sebastian had stayed in, his schedule cleared unexpectedly. The staff moved quietly, sensing something unspoken. I was tidying the sitting room when he entered. We were alone. The fire cast soft shadows across the walls. The air was warm, heavy, intimate. "Elena," he said quietly. I turned to face him. He looked at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Not desire, not yet, but something deeper, more dangerous. "This cannot continue," he said. My heart sank. "I understand," I replied, my voice calm despite the ache spreading through my chest. He stepped closer, not close enough to touch, but near enough that I could feel the heat of him, the tension radiating from his body. "That is not what I meant," he said. The silence between us pulsed. For the first time, the truth hovered on the edge of words. And neither of us knew which would come first, control or surrender. The words he had spoken lingered long after the room fell quiet. "This cannot continue." I had understood them as an ending, a warning, a line being drawn at last. But when he stepped closer, just enough for the space between us to shrink without disappearing, I realized something far more unsettling. He was not pushing me away. He was struggling to stay. The fire crackled softly behind me, its warmth pressing against my back. The room felt smaller than before, the walls closer, the air heavier. I could feel my pulse in my throat, slow but powerful, as if my body already knew what my mind was still trying to deny. Sebastian stood still, his hands relaxed at his sides, his posture controlled. Yet there was tension in him, visible now, unmistakable. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw tight, as if he were holding something back with sheer force of will. "That's not what you meant," I said quietly, repeating his words from moments before. "No," he replied. Our eyes locked, and for the first time since I had arrived at Harrington Estate, I felt as though there were no walls between us, no titles, No hierarchy, just two people standing too close to a truth neither had planned to face. "You should leave the room," he said. It was not an order. It was a plea. I did not move, not out of defiance, not out of courage, but because something in me had grown tired of running from what was already happening. "If you want me to go," I said carefully, "you'll have to say it again." The silence that followed was heavy, charged, alive. He took another step forward. Not enough to touch, enough to feel. The heat of his body reached me, warm and grounding. I could smell him now, clean, faintly woodsy, unmistakably human beneath the polish. My breath changed without permission, growing shallow, deliberate. His gaze dropped briefly, to my mouth perhaps, or the hollow of my throat, before returning to my eyes. That single glance sent a shiver through me, subtle but undeniable. "Elena," he said softly. My name sounded different now, not formal, not distant. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Yes?" He exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he had held in for far too long. "This proximity," he said, his voice low, controlled, "is dangerous." "I know," I whispered. He tilted his head slightly, studying my face as if searching for hesitation, for regret, for fear. He found none. "What do you feel right now?" he asked. The question was quiet, intimate, unavoidable. I answered honestly. "Seen," I said, "and afraid and steady." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, followed by something warmer, deeper. "That is not how this should feel," he said. "But it does," I replied. We stood there, suspended between what was allowed and what was inevitable. He did not touch me. And yet every inch of my skin felt awake, sensitized by the nearness of him. My body leaned forward imperceptibly, drawn not by desire alone, but by recognition. He noticed. His breath deepened, his chest rising slowly beneath his shirt. For a fleeting moment I thought he might step back, restore the distance we both knew was necessary. Instead he closed it. Not entirely, just enough. Our bodies were now close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, close enough that the air between us seemed to disappear. My hands hung at my sides, fingers curling slightly, resisting the urge to reach out. His gaze softened, then darkened, not with hunger but with restraint pushed to its limit. "If we continue," he said quietly, "there will be no simple way back." "I don't want simple," I replied. The words left me before fear could stop them. For a moment, he looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time, not as an employee, not as a complication, but as a woman standing in front of him by choice. His hand lifted slowly. He did not touch my face. He stopped inches away. I could feel the heat of his palm, the faint movement of air as his fingers hovered near my cheek. My breath caught, my heart pounding loud enough that I was sure he could hear it. "Tell me to stop," he said. I did not. Instead, I leaned forward just slightly, closing the distance he had left between us. His hand stilled, then lowered. He stepped back abruptly, breaking the spell like glass shattering. "No," he said sharply, not to me, but to himself. "Not like this." The rejection stung, but it did not feel cruel. It felt necessary. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. "I should go," I said. "Yes," he replied, "you should." I left the room on unsteady legs, my body buzzing with unspent energy, my skin warm, my thoughts racing. That night my bed felt too small. The sheets twisted beneath me as I turned from side to side, unable to find rest. My body remembered the closeness, the heat, the almost touch. My breath quickened as my mind replayed every second, every pause. I did not touch myself. I did not need to. The desire was already everywhere. Across the estate, Sebastian lay awake as well, staring at the ceiling, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. His body was tense, his thoughts relentless. He had never struggled like this, never with proximity alone, never with restraint that burned instead of cooled. The following days were worse. The tension did not dissipate, it sharpened. Every shared space felt intimate now. The hallway where our shoulders nearly brushed, the kitchen where our hands reached for the same object and stopped just short, the garden path where he passed close enough for our arms to graze, sending a jolt through us both. We spoke less. We felt more. Others noticed. Vivienne Caldwell's gaze lingered on me with new intensity. Her smiles sharpened, her words edged with something cold. She sensed the shift, even if she did not yet understand it fully. Sebastian noticed her attention too, and for the first time it bothered him. The house itself seemed to respond to the growing tension. The air felt heavier, the nights longer, the silence louder. One evening, after a long day, I returned to my room exhausted, my body warm from work, my uniform clinging slightly to my skin. I undressed slowly, deliberately, as if my movements carried more weight now. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. I imagined nothing explicit, just closeness, just warmth, just the sound of his breathing in the dark. Down the hall, Sebastian paced his bedroom, his tie discarded, his sleeves rolled up. He stopped by the window, then the bed, then the door. He did not come to me, but the distance between us had never felt thinner, and we both knew this was no longer something that could remain untouched for long. Sleep stopped being rest. It became a place where my body went to remember everything my mind tried to control during the day. I would lie down exhausted, muscles warm, skin still carrying the faint scent of soap and clean fabric, only to find myself wide awake minutes later. The bed never stayed neat. The sheets twisted beneath my legs, gathering and loosening as I turned, as if my body was searching for a position that could quiet what burned inside me. It never did. I learned the exact rhythm of my own breathing in the dark, learned how my chest rose faster when my thoughts drifted toward him, learned how heat pooled low in my body simply from remembering the sound of his voice saying my name without distance. Nothing happened, and yet everything was happening. The days grew heavier with that unspent energy. Work continued as always, efficient, precise, but beneath every movement there was awareness. My skin felt more sensitive, my body more present. Every hallway seemed narrower, every shared room warmer. Sebastian and I avoided each other deliberately now. Not completely, never completely, but there was a careful choreography to it. We did not linger in the same spaces. We did not speak unless necessary. When our paths crossed, our interactions were brief, controlled, professional, and impossibly charged. One afternoon, after hours of work, I returned to my room feeling wrung out. The uniform clung faintly to my skin, damp from the heat of the day and the constant motion. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, eyes shut, breathing deeply. My body felt alive in a way that unsettled me. I undressed slowly, deliberately, letting the fabric fall away piece by piece. The air against my skin felt cooler, sharper. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumping as the tension finally had nowhere to hide. The bedspread was still smooth. It wouldn't stay that way. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, my hair spreading across the pillow, my breathing uneven. The mattress creaked softly as I shifted, my legs tangling in the sheets. I imagined nothing improper, only closeness, only warmth, only the memory of standing inches from him, the firelight flickering behind us, the restraint in his eyes. My body reacted anyway. Heat, restlessness, a tightness that had no name. I turned onto my side, pulling the sheet up around my waist, then pushed it away again moments later, too warm to bear the confinement. Sweat gathered at my temples, along my spine, not from exertion, but from feeling too much without release. I pressed my palm to the mattress, grounding myself. "This is nothing," I whispered into the quiet room. The words did not convince me. Across the estate, Sebastian's night unfolded in much the same way. He stood in his bedroom, jacket discarded, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, the cool air doing nothing to calm him. The bed behind him was immaculate, untouched, a stark contrast to the tension pulling at his body. He loosened his cuffs, rolled his sleeves higher, revealing forearms taut with restrained energy. He sat on the edge of the bed and leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, head bowed slightly. Control had always been his refuge. That night it felt fragile. He lay back at last, staring up at the ceiling, the sheet still smooth beneath him. He closed his eyes and saw her, not undressed, not reaching for him, but standing in the sitting room, her breath unsteady, her eyes honest. The restraint burned worse than any desire he had known. He turned onto his side, the sheets pulling loose, then onto his back again. His body felt too warm, too aware of itself. A faint sheen of sweat gathered at his temples, his chest rising and falling with measured breaths. But sleep did not come. Morning arrived heavy and slow. I woke tangled in sheets that bore the evidence of my unrest. The bed was a mess, pillows displaced, fabric twisted, my body sore in the way it gets when it has spent the night resisting itself. I showered longer than usual, letting the water run warm over my skin, not to soothe desire, but to quiet my thoughts. I dressed carefully afterward, my expression calm, my movements precise. No one could see the storm beneath the surface. The estate buzzed quietly with its usual routine, but something felt different, charged, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Sebastian passed me in the corridor late that morning. It was unavoidable. The hallway was narrow, the walls close. He emerged from one end just as I stepped into it from the other. There was no space to retreat without making it obvious. We slowed instinctively. He nodded politely, his expression neutral, composed. "Elena," he said, his voice controlled. "Sir," I replied. We passed close enough that our arms nearly brushed. Nearly. The heat between us flared instantly, sharp and undeniable. My breath caught. I felt it in the tightness of my chest, in the way my skin prickled where his presence lingered. He stiffened just slightly. Neither of us looked back. The rest of the day passed in a haze. By evening, exhaustion pressed down on me, both physical and emotional. My body felt heavy, my thoughts slower, dulled by the constant effort of restraint. That night, the bed did not stay neat for long. I lay down and closed my eyes, but sleep refused me again. The sheets twisted beneath my legs, the pillow slipping as I shifted restlessly. My body felt warm, slightly damp, as if the tension itself generated heat. I imagined his presence, not touching, not claiming, just standing close, close enough that the space between us ceased to exist. My breathing deepened, slowed, then quickened again. I turned onto my stomach, pressing my cheek into the pillow, grounding myself in the texture of fabric and mattress. The bed creaked softly beneath me, the sound loud in the quiet room. "Enough," I whispered. But desire does not obey commands. It is patient, persistent. Across the estate, Sebastian's bed was no longer immaculate either. The sheets were rumpled now, pulled loose as he shifted restlessly. His shirt lay discarded on the floor, his skin warm, faintly damp. He lay on his back, one arm thrown over his head, jaw tight. He had never been haunted like this, not by absence, not by restraint. His mind returned again and again to the image of her quiet strength, her steady gaze, the way she did not retreat from him, even when fear flickered behind her eyes. He rolled onto his side, the mattress dipping beneath his weight, the sheets tangled around his legs, the pillow pressed beneath his cheek. His breathing deepened. This was not hunger, it was recognition. Days passed in this suspended state. The beds in both rooms told the story no one else could see, of restless nights, of bodies that refused to settle, of desire that had no acceptable place to go. The tension spilled into the days now, subtle but unmistakable. I found myself flushing more easily, catching my breath without realizing it, pausing mid-task as my thoughts drifted, unbidden, toward him. Sebastian grew quieter, more contained. His gaze lingered longer than before, though he never crossed the line. His presence felt heavier, his silence more charged. Others noticed. Vivienne Caldwell watched with sharp eyes, her posture rigid, her smiles thinner. She sensed the shift, the undercurrent running through the house, and it unsettled her. One evening, I was folding linens in the quiet of the laundry room when Sebastian appeared in the doorway. I did not hear him approach. I felt him, my hands stilled, the fabric warm from the dryer slipping through my fingers. "Elena," he said softly. I turned to face him. The room was warm, the air thick with the scent of clean cotton and heat. The hum of machines filled the silence, steady and low. "Yes, sir?" I replied. He did not answer immediately. His gaze moved over me, not possessively, not openly, but with an intensity that made my breath falter. I was aware of my body in a way that made standing still difficult, aware of the faint sheen of warmth at my temples, the way my uniform clung just slightly. "You look tired," he said. "So do you," I replied before I could stop myself. Something flickered across his face, surprise, then a quiet acknowledgement. "We should be careful," he said. "I know," I answered. The space between us felt suddenly too small. The machines hummed. The heat pressed in. Neither of us moved closer. Neither of us stepped away. We stood there, bodies warm, beds waiting behind closed doors, desire thick in the air like something living. Nothing happened. And that was the most unbearable part. The hardest battles are never loud. They do not announce themselves with raised voices or dramatic gestures. They happen quietly, behind composed faces and steady routines, inside minds that know exactly what is at stake and hearts that refuse to cooperate. That was where I lived now. Inside conflict. Every morning I woke with the same resolve. Today will be different. Today I would be nothing more than efficient, invisible, disciplined. I would remember my place. I would remember his. I would remember the distance that separated us, not just in status, but in consequences. And every morning, the resolve cracked the moment I stepped into the house, because desire had evolved into something far more dangerous. It was no longer just physical awareness. It was emotional gravity. I felt it in the way my chest tightened when I sensed him nearby, in the way my thoughts drifted toward him without effort, in the quiet ache that settled beneath my ribs. when I imagined a life where this tension never existed. I did not want him as a fantasy. I wanted him as a reality, and that terrified me. I began to question myself in ways I never had before. Was I projecting something onto him because he represented everything I had never known? Security, power, certainty. Was my desire born from imbalance, from contrast, from longing for a world that was not meant for me? Or was it something far simpler and far more dangerous? Was I falling in love? The word felt heavy, inappropriate, almost arrogant. Love was not something you claimed lightly. Love demanded equality, choice, freedom, none of which existed between us. And yet every instinct in me recognized something real. Sebastian was fighting his own war. I could see it in him now, even without words. His control, once effortless, had become deliberate, maintained, strained. He spoke less, slept less. His presence carried weight, not the kind that commanded, but the kind that endured. I noticed the way he paused before entering rooms I was in, as if bracing himself. The way his gaze would linger, then pull away sharply, like a hand withdrawn from heat. Once I caught my reflection in a hallway mirror as he passed behind me. My face was calm. His was not. There was something in his expression I had never seen before. Uncertainty. That realization shook me more than anything else. Sebastian Harrington did not doubt. He decided. He acted. He controlled outcomes the way other people controlled their breath. And now he was doubting. Because of me. That thought filled me with a strange mixture of pride and guilt. I did not want to be his weakness, but I wanted to be his truth. One afternoon, the conflict became unbearable. I was alone in the service corridor organizing supplies when the weight of it all finally pressed too hard against my chest. My hands shook as I folded linens that did not need folding. My breathing turned shallow, uneven. This was not who I was. I had survived far worse than longing. I had endured loss, scarcity, silence. I had learned how to stand on my own without expecting rescue. And now I was unraveling because of a man who had never even touched me. I closed my eyes and leaned my forehead against the cool wall. You have to stop this, I told myself, before it costs you everything. But stopping meant something else too. It meant walking away from the first person who had ever truly seen me, not as fragile, not as invisible, not as something to be managed, as equal in presence if not in power. Across the estate, Sebastian sat alone in his study, staring at documents he had read 3 times already without absorbing a word. His thoughts circled the same impossible questions. What was he doing? He had built his life on clarity, on decisions that served purpose, on relationships that fit neatly into strategy, image, expectation. Elena Moore fit none of those categories. She disrupted him simply by existing as she was, unpolished, honest, unafraid to meet his gaze without agenda. She did not want anything from him. That, more than anything, unsettled him. He had always been wanted, for his name, his wealth, his power. Never for his silence, his doubt, his unfinished edges. With her he felt exposed, not because she asked anything of him, but because she didn't. And exposure terrified him. He began to ask himself questions he had avoided for years. When had control become armor instead of strength? When had distance replaced connection? When had safety started to feel like emptiness? The answer, he realized, was simple and unbearable. Long before Elena arrived, she had not created the fracture. She had revealed it. That evening, we crossed paths in the main stairway. It was unavoidable. He was descending, I was ascending. The space between us narrowed with each step. Neither of us stopped. Neither of us spoke. We passed close enough that the fabric of his sleeve brushed my arm. The contact was accidental. It felt intentional. A jolt ran through me, sharp, electric, immediate. My breath hitched. I felt the warmth of him linger against my skin long after we had passed. I continued upward, my heart pounding, my legs unsteady. Behind me, Sebastian stopped. I heard it. The pause, the shift, the breath he drew too deeply. My name again. This time it carried weight. I turned slowly, gripping the banister for balance. Yes, I asked. He stood a few steps below me, his expression controlled but strained. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made the rest of the house disappear. This cannot continue, he said again. This time the words felt different, not like a warning, like a confession. I swallowed. I agree. Silence fell between us, heavy with everything those words meant and did not mean. You don't, he said quietly. I do, I replied, because if it does, it will cost more than either of us is ready to lose. He studied me, his jaw tightening. You think I haven't considered that? I think you've considered everything, I said softly, except what it would mean to live without it. The truth of that landed between us like a blow. His breath deepened. His hands curled slightly at his sides. "You make it sound simple," he said. "It's not," I answered. "That's why it hurts." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The house felt suspended around us as if listening. Then he spoke again, his voice lower, rougher. "If you stay," he said, "this will only get harder." I nodded. "I know." "And if you leave?" The word echoed painfully. I met his gaze, my heart aching. "It will hurt too." He looked away then, just briefly, as if the weight of the choice pressed too heavily on him. "You should go," he said, not as an order. I descended the stairs slowly, every step feeling like resistance. When I reached the bottom, I did not look back. That night I cried for the first time since arriving at the estate, not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly into my pillow, with restraint even in grief. My body curled inward, my chest tight, tears slipping silently as I tried to make sense of loving someone I could not have without destroying both of us. Sebastian spent that night pacing. He did not sleep. He stood at his window, hands pressed against the glass, staring out at the darkness, knowing with painful clarity that the greatest risk he had ever faced was not financial, not strategic. It was emotional. And for the first time in his life, he did not know how to win without losing something essential. The conflict did not resolve that night. It deepened. Because once love reaches this stage, once it becomes something you argue with, something you fear, something you try to deny, it is already too powerful to escape. Some moments arrive without noise. They do not announce themselves with storms or raised voices. They slip in quietly, almost gently, and yet they carry the weight to change everything that comes after. The day it happened felt ordinary at first. The morning light was pale and soft, the kind that makes even large rooms feel fragile. The house moved through its routine with practiced ease, but beneath it, something trembled. I felt it the moment I woke, a pressure in my chest that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with inevitability. I knew without knowing how that something had reached its limit. I dressed slowly that morning, my hands steady even as my heart raced. I chose simplicity as I always did, smoothing the fabric over my skin, tying my hair back with care. I looked at myself in the mirror longer than usual, not to judge. Who I was before this house, before him, before desire became something that shaped my breathing. I stepped into the corridor and felt the estate breathe around me, quiet and watchful. Sebastian did not avoid me that day, nor did he seek me out, but the pull between us felt sharper, clearer, like a thread drawn too tight to remain unbroken. By late afternoon, the air had warmed, sunlight spilling through tall windows, turning dust into gold. I was alone in the sitting room, arranging cushions that did not need arranging, my hands busy because my thoughts refused to be. I heard him before I saw him. His footsteps were measured, slower than usual. "Elena," he said softly from the doorway. I turned. He stood there without the armor he usually wore. No jacket, shirt open at the collar. His expression was calm, but something raw lived beneath it, visible now that I knew how to see. "Yes," I replied. "May I speak with you?" he asked. "Not come here, not stay. May I?" The question landed with unexpected tenderness. I nodded. "Of course." He closed the door behind him, not abruptly, not deliberately, just quietly. The sound echoed softly in the room, final in a way that made my chest tighten. We stood facing each other, the space between us familiar now, intimate, without touch. "I have tried," he began, then stopped. He exhaled slowly, as if choosing honesty over habit. "I have tried to convince myself that this is nothing," he said, "that it is temporary. That distance and discipline would be enough." I said nothing. "Some truths need silence to survive." "They are not," he continued. "Enough, I mean." My throat tightened. "Sebastian!" He lifted a hand gently, not to silence me but to ask for time. "Please," he said, "let me finish." I nodded. He stepped closer, not all the way, but close enough that the warmth of him reached me again. My skin reacted instantly, a quiet awareness spreading through my body, like a held breath finally released. "I have built my life on control," he said, his voice steady but low, "on structure, on choosing what is safe over what is true, and it worked, for a long time." His gaze held mine, unwavering now. "Until you," he said. The word was not an accusation. It was a recognition. I swallowed, my heart pounding. "I never meant to—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "That is why this matters." The room felt impossibly quiet, as if the house itself were listening. "I don't know when it happened," he continued, "only that somewhere between your silence and your steadiness, something in me stopped hiding." My breath caught. He took another step closer. Still no touch. "Tell me," he said quietly, "that I am imagining this." The question was a plea dressed as composure. I shook my head, tears burning unexpectedly behind my eyes. "You're not." The words felt like stepping off a ledge. I tried to ignore it, I admitted. I tried to be practical, sensible. I told myself this was admiration or curiosity or a mistake. "And?" he asked. "And it never felt like a mistake," I said. "It felt like recognition." Something broke open in his expression then. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but like a wall finally cracking under too much pressure. He closed the distance between us. Not with urgency, with certainty. We stood inches apart, close enough that the air between us felt unnecessary. I could feel the heat of him, the tension in his stillness, the effort it took for him not to reach out. My own body responded instinctively, my breath slowing, my shoulders relaxing, my chest lifting with each inhale. The nearness felt overwhelming and grounding at the same time. "I am not easy," he said quietly. "My world is not kind, it is heavy, demanding, it consumes." I nodded. "I know." "And still," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "you stand here." "I do," I said. He searched my face, his gaze lingering on my eyes, my mouth, the line of my jaw. There was no hunger in it, only depth. "I'm afraid," he admitted. The words stunned me more than any confession of desire could have. "Of what?" I asked softly. "Of hurting you," he said, "of losing you, of being too much." Something in my chest ached open. I lifted my hand slowly, deliberately, and placed it against his chest, not pressing, not claiming, just resting there, feeling the steady beat beneath my palm. "You don't feel too much to me," I said. "You feel real." His breath hitched. For a moment he did not move. Then carefully, as if afraid the moment would vanish, he covered my hand with his own. The contact was simple. It was everything. Warmth spread through me, slow and deep, my body responding not with urgency but with recognition. The world narrowed to that single point of connection, my hand beneath his breath mingling with mine. He leaned forward slightly, his forehead resting gently against mine. No kiss, just closeness. "I have never been seen the way you see me," he said quietly. "And I have never felt chosen the way I feel with you," I replied. The words felt like truth finally exhaling. We stood there for a long moment, breathing together, bodies close, hearts loud. Sweat gathered lightly at my temples, not from heat, but from the intensity of feeling too much at once. The room seemed warmer, the air thicker, alive with everything we had held back. "I don't know what comes next," he said. "Neither do I answered. "But I know this," he continued. "I don't want to pretend anymore." Tears slipped free then, quiet and unstoppable. I did not wipe them away. "Neither do I whispered. He lifted his head and looked at me, his thumb brushing the back of my hand in a gesture so gentle it felt reverent. "This changes everything," he said. "Yes," I replied, "and that's why it matters." We did not kiss. We did not need to. The climax was not physical. It was emotional. It was the moment two guarded lives chose truth over safety, connection over control, vulnerability over silence. When he finally stepped back, the distance felt different, not empty but intentional. "Stay," he said softly. "For now, stay." I nodded. "I will," I said, "as long as we are honest." He smiled then, not the controlled, distant smile the world knew, but something real and unguarded. "Always," he said. The house remained quiet, but nothing inside it was the same. Love did not make things easier. That was the first truth I learned after the night everything was finally said. If anything, it made everything heavier, because once honesty entered the space between us, there was no pretending left, no safe illusion to hide behind. What we felt was no longer a quiet undercurrent. It was a presence, undeniable and alive, shaping every choice that followed. The days after our confession were strangely calm on the surface. Sebastian did not change his behavior in public. He did not touch me. He did not seek me out openly. The hierarchy of the house remained intact, the routines unchanged. To anyone watching, nothing had shifted. But inside that calm lived tension sharp enough to cut. We were aware of each other constantly now, not as possibility, but as reality held back by restraint. Every shared glance carried memory. Every pause carried meaning. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was full, too full. I began to understand that love, once named, does not fade into comfort. It demands action. It asks questions that cannot be ignored. And soon, those questions came from the outside. Vivian Caldwell did not miss the change. She had always been observant, strategic, attuned to shifts in power. Now her attention sharpened into something dangerous. Her presence in the house grew more frequent, her comments more pointed, her smiles more calculated. She watched Sebastian with possession, and she watched me with suspicion that bordered on hostility. I felt it in the way conversation stopped when I entered rooms she occupied, in the way her gaze lingered, cold and assessing, as if she were measuring how much damage I could do. She did not confront me directly. That was not her style. Instead, she spoke to others, quietly, elegantly, with concern disguised as care. She questioned my background, my intentions, my place, and the house listened. The weight of it settled on me slowly, like a fog that crept in without warning. I noticed the change in how some of the staff looked at me, less neutral, more cautious, the whispers that followed me through hallways, the silence that felt judgmental rather than indifferent. I carried it quietly, Sebastian noticed. He did not ask me directly, but his gaze lingered longer, his presence nearer. There was a protectiveness in him now, subtle but unmistakable. Still, he said nothing, until one evening, when the tension finally broke. We were in the study again, the same room where restraint had first faltered. The lights were low, the air heavy with the scent of old books and polished wood. He stood by the desk, his expression controlled but distant. "Elena," he said, "we need to talk." My heart sank. I nodded, bracing myself. "Yes." He did not look at me immediately. Instead, he stared out the window, his reflection faint in the glass. "This cannot continue the way it is," he said. The words felt familiar, painfully so. "I know," I replied. He turned then, his gaze intense. "Do you?" "Yes," I said quietly, "because love does not exist in silence forever. It either grows or it breaks." He exhaled slowly. "And right now it's doing both." I felt tears sting my eyes, but I held them back. "Sebastian, if being with me costs you your world—" He interrupted me gently. "It already has." The words stunned me. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. Not because of scandal, not because of reputation, but because it forced me to see things I spent years avoiding. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident now. This house, these alliances, these expectations, they were built on control, not truth. And now that truth is here, it does not fit. The realization hit me with painful clarity. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything," I said. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "You are not the reason," he said. "You are the mirror." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. "I see what's happening," I continued softly. "The pressure, the looks, the questions that aren't being asked out loud." He nodded once. "Vivienne has made sure of that." The name landed like a weight between us. "I never wanted to stand in the way of your life," I said. "I never wanted to be a liability." "You are not a liability," he replied firmly. "You are the only thing that has felt real in years. That should have been enough. But love does not erase reality. It sharpens it." That night, alone in my room, I finally allowed myself to think the thought I had been avoiding. What if loving him means letting him go? The idea hurt more than I thought possible. It settled deep in my chest, heavy and cold, stealing my breath. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my body exhausted, my mind racing. The sheets tangled beneath me as I shifted restlessly, my skin warm, my chest tight. I loved him. Not as fantasy, not as escape, as choice. And that meant choosing what was right, not just what was wanted. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. The decision did not feel brave. It felt devastating. I went about my duties quietly, deliberately, committing every detail to memory. The sound of footsteps in the corridors, the way light fell across the marble floors, the weight of the air in the rooms we had shared in silence. By evening, I asked to see him. He met me in the garden, where dusk softened everything, where the world felt less rigid, less watched. He knew before I spoke. "I see it in your eyes," he said quietly. "You've decided." Tears burned, but I held his gaze. "I don't want to be the reason you bleed for loving me." He stepped closer, his hands clenching at his sides. "Elena." "I love you," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "And because I love you, I can't stay." The words fell between us like something breaking. "No," he said, his voice sharp with denial. "That's not how this ends." "It has to be," I replied softly. "Not because our love isn't strong enough, but because it is." He looked at me as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "You think leaving protects me?" "I know it does," I said, "and it protects me too from becoming something I don't recognize." Silence stretched, heavy and raw. Finally he spoke again, his voice quieter. "If you go, this house will feel empty in a way I don't know how to survive." I stepped closer then, closing the distance one last time. I did not touch him. "I don't want you to survive," I said gently. "I want you to live." That night I packed quietly. No farewell, no drama. Just a folded uniform, a small bag, and a heart full of something that would never leave me. Sebastian did not stop me. Not because he didn't want to, because he understood. The separation was silent and devastating. but it was also an act of love. Leaving did not bring relief. It brought silence. Not the calm kind, the kind that echoes, the kind that follows you into rooms and sits beside you when you try to sleep, the kind that reminds you over and over of what you chose to protect and what you were forced to abandon. I returned to a smaller world. A modest apartment, narrow streets, familiar sounds. Life reduced again to manageable dimensions. The simplicity should have comforted me. Instead, it felt incomplete, like a song missing its final note. I went back to work, to routine, to practicality. I smiled when spoken to. I nodded when asked how I was doing. "I'm fine," I said. It was true in the way survival is true, but inside me something waited. I woke each morning with the same ache beneath my ribs, the same quiet thought that arrived before reason could intervene. He's still out there, and more frightening than that. I left part of myself behind. Sebastian's surrender began the moment I walked out of the estate. At first, he tried to resume control. He filled his days with meetings, negotiations, numbers. He surrounded himself with familiar pressures, convinced himself that discipline would dull the loss. It didn't. The house felt different without me. Not louder, not emptier in a dramatic way, just hollow. He noticed it in the smallest details, the absence of footsteps in the hallway at certain hours, the quiet corners where warmth used to linger, the way the air felt heavier at night, as if the walls themselves remembered something they were no longer allowed to hold. He slept poorly. His bed remained large and untouched, the sheets neat in the way untouched things are, cold, unused, waiting. When sleep came, it was shallow, interrupted by dreams that ended just before relief. He dreamed of proximity, of standing close without touching, of breath shared in silence. He dreamed of me leaving again and again, no matter how many times he tried to speak. During the day, the pressure returned from all sides. Vivian Caldwell did not waste time. She moved quickly, decisively, using the absence she sensed as opportunity. Her influence sharpened. Her voice grew louder in the rooms where decisions were made. She spoke of image, of stability, of risk. She spoke of me without using my name. Sebastian listened. And for the first time in his life, he did not remain silent. "This ends now," he said one evening, his voice calm but unyielding. Vivian's smile tightened. "You're being emotional." "No," he replied, "I'm being honest." The word tasted unfamiliar, liberating. He began to see the pattern clearly now. The manipulations he had tolerated, the alliances built on fear rather than respect, the way he had traded pieces of himself for control. And suddenly, control no longer felt like power. It felt like a cage. Days turned into weeks. I tried to convince myself that time would dull the edges, that distance would do what proximity never could. But love once chosen does not dissolve. It waits, quietly, patiently. One night I sat on my bed, the room lit only by a small lamp, my body heavy with exhaustion I could not explain. The sheets were rumpled beneath me, twisted from restless movement. I pressed my palms into the mattress, grounding myself. I missed him, not the idea of him. The man who listened in silence, the man who struggled and admitted fear, the man who looked at me as if I were not too small for his world, but essential to it. Tears came without warning, not violent, not dramatic, just honest. "I did this for love," I whispered into the quiet room, and for the first time, I wondered if love was asking something different now. That same night, Sebastian reached his limit. He stood alone in his study, the lights low, the city glowing faintly beyond the glass. Papers lay scattered on the desk, contracts he had postponed signing, decisions he had delayed making. He looked at his reflection in the window. For the first time, he did not recognize the man staring back. Too controlled, too distant, too empty. He thought of me, not leaving, not crying, but standing in the garden, telling him the truth with steady eyes and a breaking heart. "I want you to live," the words echoed, and suddenly he understood. Letting me go had not been the sacrifice. Staying silent afterward had been the betrayal. The next morning he cancelled everything. Meetings, calls, obligations. He left the estate without announcement, without entourage, without armor. When he knocked on my door, I almost didn't open it. I stood frozen on the other side, my heart pounding, my breath shallow. I knew before I saw him. I always did. When I opened the door, he stood there. No jacket, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired and resolute. "Elena," he said softly. My name sounded different now. Uncontrolled. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me as if memorizing every detail, as if afraid the moment might vanish. "I came to stop hiding," he said. The words struck deep. I stepped aside without thinking. He entered slowly, respectfully, as if stepping into sacred ground. We stood facing each other in the small room, the distance between us unfamiliar now, too close, too real, too unprotected. "I tried to live without you," he said quietly. "I thought letting you go was the final act of love." "And now?" I asked. "And now I understand something else," he replied. "Love does not end with sacrifice, it continues with choice." My chest tightened. "I was wrong to let you carry that burden alone," he continued. "You left to protect me. I stayed to protect nothing." Tears welled, but I did not look away. "I don't want your world to destroy you," I said. "It won't," he replied. "Not anymore, because I'm done letting it." Silence filled the room, thick and alive. He took a step closer, then another. Not hurried, not desperate, certain. "I am choosing you," he said. "Not as an escape, not as rebellion, as truth." I trembled, not from fear, but from release. "I don't need perfection," I whispered. "I need honesty." "You have it," he said, "all of it." He stopped inches from me, close enough that the air between us felt unnecessary again. My body responded instinctively, breath deepening, shoulders softening, the tension I had carried for weeks finally loosening its grip. I lifted my hand slowly and rested it against his chest. His heart was racing. "So is mine," I admitted. He covered my hand with his, grounding, warm, steady. "This time," he said, "we don't run." I nodded. That was the surrender. Not to desire, not to fear. To love that refused to be negotiated away. We did not rush. We sat together on the edge of the bed, shoulders touching, bodies warm, the sheets already rumpled from restless nights. The closeness was quiet, reverent, charged with meaning rather than urgency. Sweat gathered lightly on our skin, not from heat, but from release, from the body recognizing safety after too long in tension. He rested his forehead against mine. "I'm here," he whispered. "So am I," I replied. And for the first time since this began, surrender did not feel like loss. It felt like coming home. Happiness did not arrive all at once. It arrived quietly, then steadily, the way light fills a room at dawn, not dramatic, not sudden, but undeniable once it was there. After that night, nothing between us needed to be hidden anymore, not because the world suddenly became kind, but because we stopped letting fear make our choices. Sebastian did not ask me to return to Harrington Estate right away. He did not rush, did not claim, did not demand. Instead, he stayed, present, attentive, human, in the small apartment that had become my refuge. We learned each other in stillness first. Mornings were simple, coffee brewed slowly, sunlight slipping through thin curtains, shared silence that felt warm rather than empty. He would sit at the small table, sleeves rolled up, reading nothing in particular, just existing in a way I had never seen him do before. I watched him soften, not weaken, soften. The man who once filled rooms with command now filled space with attention. He listened more than he spoke. He laughed quietly, sometimes at nothing. He noticed details he had never had time for before, the sound of the street below, the way my expression changed when I was thinking, the rhythm of my breath when I slept. At night we shared a bed not as an escape but as a choice. The sheets never stayed neat, not from urgency, not from chaos, but from closeness, from bodies turning toward each other without fear, from warmth exchanged in the dark, from limbs finding comfort, not conquest. Our bodies grew familiar, not rushed, not claimed, recognized. There were moments when desire stirred, deep, steady, undeniable, but it was never sharp or desperate. It moved like a slow tide, present in the way we breathed together, in the way his hand rested at my waist while we slept, in the way my fingers traced the lines of his arm without intention. Sweat came not from heat alone, but from release, from the body finally allowed to rest after weeks of restraint. We would wake tangled in sheets, skin warm, hair disheveled, the air heavy with something intimate and calm. Love felt safe, and that was new, but the world still existed. Sebastian did not abandon it, he reshaped it. He returned to his life with clarity instead of armor. Meetings resumed, but alliances shifted. He spoke less and listened more. He cut ties that had relied on fear, manipulation, or silence. Vivian Caldwell tried once more. This time she did not whisper. She confronted. In a room filled with people who expected Sebastian to maintain appearances, she spoke of betrayal, of reputation, of risk. She framed love as weakness and compassion as loss. Sebastian listened. Then he stood. "I won't negotiate my humanity anymore," he said calmly. "If my world cannot hold love without breaking, then it deserves to be rebuilt." The room fell silent. Vivian left without another word. Her power dissolved not with drama but with irrelevance. And in that moment, something profound happened. Sebastian stopped being defined by what he owned. He became defined by what he chose. When he asked me to return to Harrington Estate, it was not as an employee. It was as his partner. I hesitated, not from doubt, but from respect for what the choice meant. Only if the house becomes a home, I said, not a symbol. He smiled, the real one, the one that had nothing to prove. Then we'll change it together, he replied. The return felt different. The estate breathed differently. The silence softened. The air felt lighter. The halls no longer pressed inward. Light moved more freely through the rooms, not because the architecture changed, but because the people inside did. I was no longer watched. I was welcomed. Some looks lingered. Some judgments remained, but they no longer mattered. Love had given us gravity of our own. At night, the bedroom we shared was not grand. It was warm. The bed was often undone, sheets loose, pillows displaced, bodies resting close without effort. We slept better there, deeply, fully, as if the house itself approved of rest at last. There were moments of passion, not explosive, not reckless, but full-bodied and sincere. Moments when breath caught, when closeness turned electric, when the space between us disappeared completely without a single word needing to be spoken. Still never vulgar, always intentional, always chosen. Time moved forward. Weeks turned into months. And one evening, as the sun lowered over the gardens, Sebastian took my hand and led me outside. The air was warm, the sky painted in soft gold and pink. "I want to ask you something," he said. I looked at him, my heart steady, open. "Ask." He did not kneel. He stood in front of me, eye level, grounded. "I don't want a life built on power," he said. "I want one built on truth, on partnership, on choosing each other every day." He took a breath. "Will you marry me?" Tears came instantly, not from shock, from recognition. "Yes," I said, "with all of me." The wedding was not extravagant, it was honest. No spectacle, no performance, no proof required. Just vows spoken clearly, hands held firmly, eyes locked with certainty. When we kissed, it was not a beginning. It was a continuation. The house transformed over time, not into something smaller, into something warmer. Children came later, laughter echoing through halls that once held only silence. Sebastian became a father who knelt to listen, who held without fear, who loved without control. I became the heart of the home, not because I belonged to it, but because I chose it. And together we proved something simple and powerful. That love does not need permission from the world. That desire does not weaken dignity. That true power is choosing tenderness in a place that once thrived on distance. Our beds remained messy, our bodies often warm, our hearts always open. And the memory that once burned quietly inside me no longer haunted. It lived. Because in the end, the world may be too large, but love, chosen with courage, will always be larger still. If this story made your heart beat faster, if you felt my fear, my desire, my choice, then don't leave silently. Leave a like to show me this love mattered. Subscribe to the channel so I can keep telling stories like ours. And tell me in the comments, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Thank you for staying until the end. Your presence is why these stories continue.